So now to turn to Mr. Venkiteswaran, you sir represent one of our new generation modern institutions. And when in '94 the licenses were given out, there was a sense in that new government and that new regime that the private sector banks would fill many of the holes that somehow the other parts of the component were not performing. And in some ways, many of the new generation private sector banks came out of older public sector organizations. So in some ways, there was some comfort that they would bring the culture, the integrity of the public sector, but the modernity of the private sector. To what extent do you think in this particular case, when we're talking about rural, remote financial services, private sector banks have made a headway? What do you see as the future in terms of their contribution when they go forward?
Thank you, Dr. Najiket. As you rightly said, last 15 years, private sector banks are present in this country. Today, they are not very insignificant. They have a fairly large market share in the business, this thing. They have made a lot of changes in the way we do banking. Technologically, there were a lot of changes. There were a lot of touch points by way of ATMs and other alternative technologies. And people have adopted to these technologies without much problem. Probably 10 years or 12 years back when an ATM was put in a small, not an urban place, maybe a semi-urban place, there were apprehensions. I remember way back in 1997, the first ATM where I was a branch manager, every day we used to go on demonstrating, explaining how to use an ATM card. Still people were asking, where is this money going, from where it comes, whether my money will be safe. I have not experienced. One of my friend told the typical ATM operations in one branch where he was working is people used to put money, come back, take the balance confirmation from the ATM, go back to the branch and say that you show it in the system whether this money is there. We have come a long way from that. Today I don't think that's happening anywhere. So the big change that came with the private sector bank is the way the banking is done in this country. It was not, as Dr. Bakshi said, it was not 10 to 2 banking. It became probably 9 to 5 or 9 to 3, depending upon the bank. There were multiple channels round the clock, 24/7 kind of availability of channels were there. Lot of new products came into being, a lot of innovative product. Probably 15 years back, there was nothing called retail banking as such. What we had is deposit mobilization retail and lending wholesale. Today there is a lot of retail lending happening. There is segmentation of customers, the low value, middle value kind of segmentation, and suitable products are being developed. So these banks have shown capability. Now coming to the rural space also, almost all of these banks have a fair share of rural lending. It may not be as low as 5,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees. It could be more on the 75,000, 78,000 or a lakh of rupees average type. But many of the large private sector banks are present in the rural space financing farmers. It may not be a pan-India operation. For example, Axis Bank, we have operations across some 13 states, not all over India. But we are very focused. We have 250 locations where we do rural lending. It is not a VIP lending, it's something like middle class farmers. People who have a few acres, many of them small marginal farmers, progressive farmers. So the role private sector bank played in the universal banking space by bringing in a lot of resources by way of capital, resources by way of infrastructure and technology, equipments, and capable, committed, well-motivated, well-rewarded people. That made the whole difference. This changed the face of banking in this country. In fact, public sector came later with ATMs and technology. Today, everybody has adopted it. Almost all the banks have a centralized banking solution. Almost all the banks follow the same. Okay, the level of technology may be different from bank to bank, but almost all of them are offering the same kind of services and same kind of products. Now coming into financial inclusion, whether there is a role for this new generation private sector banks. Yes, there is a role. Probably the new generation private sector banks, old generation also, old generation is a comparatively a smaller player. We do have a role by creating a similar kind of a setup for the rural landscape, by creating suitable products, by at least doing our share of business. May not be pan-India, in whichever area we choose to do, we can do this business. We can introduce alternate technologies, we can come with new products, and definitely it will create some impact. Now what is missing here? The branch banking per se is not going to work for this model. It is expensive. All banks are cost conscious. All have to make as Mr. Srinivasan rightly said, banks have multiple responsibilities. You need to have a capital adequacy, you need to be profitable, you need to have low NPAs. At the same time, you need to have your social commitment also. Today, I am very sure none of the Indian private sector banks are seeing rural banking or financial inclusion as a CSR. They have recognized that this is an important banking segment. It's a promising segment. There is a lot to do it here. It's a market which will be available for business even from a pure commercial sense for the next 20-25 years. But right now we are all doing some pilots. We are experimenting something. We have not reached a ledge there. It can be scaled up and done as a massive project, commercially self-breaking. What we need to do probably here is, there was an interesting discussion on the business correspondent. It needs to be much more friendly. Today it is a lot of reservations, lot of doubts are there. Again, Mr. Srinivasan was telling that probably banks will be averse to take any kind of reputational or agency risk. This is a big risk for banks. Banks work on trust, especially in the rural landscape where people are not so educated. A small rumor can kill banks. Some agent running away with a little bit of money can create huge problems, huge reputational risk. So the business correspondent model should encourage kind of a professional correspondents who have the right kind of technology, right kind of people, and right kind of remuneration, and that will make the whole difference. And these kind of spokes, these will act as spokes, VCs will act as spokes. The bank branch, whichever it is, maybe at the district headquarters or at the taluka headquarters, will act as a hub, and this will be definitely bringing a lot of changes. So what I feel as a representative of a private sector bank is, there is no need of any new institution, and definitely not a single institution can make these changes. There is need for competition. All these institutions need to be competitive and complement each other. There will be different segments, even a 1,000 rupee account or a 500 rupee account, whether it will be very viable for a commercial bank, I really don't know. There we need NBFCs, we need NGO MFIs, we need all the players. Cooperative banks will continue to play. These are some specialized businesses giving a crop loan. Of course, we also do in the private, but not to that massive scale, not of that size. These are specialized businesses. All these institutions needs to be there. Regulatory environment should be much more friendly, much more empathetic. There should be a little bit of changes to be made in this environment. And I think it's going to happen. It's only a question of time. I mean, probably morning we saw an interesting graph. Probably we are at that disappointment level. From there, it's starting to change. I mean, this committee report which is being debated now, definitely some of it will be accepted. It may not be enough. It may not be enough. But there is a change. There is an acceptance that this is not enough. It needs some change. There is a recognition. That itself is a very significant thing. So we do see a significant role for private sector bank. Even with all these constraints, private sector banks are playing a very significant role in the payment space. For example, Narega's payments, private sector banks have a good share. HDFC Bank, Axis Bank has a good share. So definitely we are there. We need to be there. That's it.
Thank you very much, sir. So the sense I've got from this conversations is that clearly both public sector banks and private sector banks see an important role for themselves, but really on the ground, the sense is that there needs to be another player, either a business correspondent or an NGO MFI or somebody on the ground to actually do that hand-holding. There is some concern, both of you have expressed, that business correspondent, while a very good move, very positive move, there is some anxiety that there may be reputation risk. Who is this person? What is their antecedents? Who are they? Will they be able to do it or not? One clear alternative that Dr. Bakshi has pointed out is that cooperative banks, indeed, there is hope. Several state governments, 14, have gone ahead and amended the laws. You know, it will take time. It may make slow progress. But even if 50%, are able to really transform, that will be a very positive direction.